The wind howled like a living thing across the broken surface of Eranos, rattling against ruined spires of alien stone and iron that jutted from the snow like the bones of giants. Once these towers had been beacons of wealth, adorned with banners of interstellar dynasties. Now they stood buried to their crowns in ice, their proud insignias shredded into nothing by storms that never ceased. Captain Elias Ward trudged through the blizzard, each breath crystallizing in the bitter air. His boots sank knee-deep into drifts, his coat stiff with frost, but he kept moving, slow, steady, disciplined. The storm clawed at his visor, filling the edges with frozen mist, but he ignored it. He had walked through worse, or so he told himself. The truth was that this cold frightened him more than battle ever had. Bullets and plasma fire he could understand. Enemies had faces, motives, weaknesses. But the cold was a patient assassin, merciless, invisible, and relentless. He adjusted the strap on his rifle, though he doubted he'd need it. The war was already over here, at least this battle. What remained were corpses half buried in the snow and echoes of alien machines that would never rise again. Somewhere beneath his boots lay the blood of 2 warring houses, frozen before it could even stain the ice. Elias pressed forward, not because he expected victory, but because he sought survivors. There has to be someone left, he told himself. If there's no one left alive, then the ceasefire talks die with them. And if they die, so do we. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, tolerated more than trusted. To the warring alien clans, Earth's emissaries were at best an annoyance, at worst opportunists waiting to pick scraps from fallen empires. Elias needed to prove otherwise. Humanity had more to offer than muscle and mercenaries. The wind shifted, carrying with it a strange sound. Not the moan of broken metal or the groan of ice collapsing. Something else? Elias paused, raising his head. The snow stung his face like shards of glass. He cupped his hand around his ear, straining against the shriek of the storm. There it was again, a muffled scrape, faint but deliberate, like armor dragging against stone. His pulse quickened. With effort, he pushed through the drift, each step sinking, lifting, sinking again. His breath rasped louder inside his helmet. The sound grew stronger as he approached the base of a toppled spire, and then he saw it. Half buried in ice lay a figure, tall, armored in plates of dull silver etched with sigils he recognized from the banners of House Vaynar. The alien's chest rose and fell shallowly, barely moving. His gauntleted hand twitched weakly against the snow, as though refusing to surrender to it. Elias crouched, brushing away frost. A face emerged beneath a cracked helm, angular features, skin tinted with the faint blue hue of the Vaynar bloodline. His lips were darkened from cold, his eyes closed, his breath fogging in ragged intervals. Recognition struck Elias like a blow. This wasn't just a soldier. This was Prince Kaelor Vaynar, heir to the frozen throne, commander of the very forces humanity had been trying to make peace with, and he was dying. The wind screamed overhead, tearing through Elias's coat. For a moment he only stared at the alien prince, heart hammering in his chest. Logic told him to move on, to report what he'd found and let the cold finish its work. An airless house meant peace talks might collapse on their own, but it also meant less resistance to outside influence. But as Elias watched Kaelor's hand curl, ever so faintly, into the snow, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not because of politics, not because of strategy, but because there was life here, and Elias Ward did not leave life to die in the cold. He knelt beside the alien, brushing the ice from the prince's throat to feel for a pulse. Faint. Fading. Elias exhaled slowly, his breath clouding. "Well," he muttered into the storm, "of all the things I expected to find out here, you weren't on the list." He adjusted the straps of his coat, already knowing what this discovery demanded of him. The cold roared louder, as if it had overheard his thoughts and approved. At first, Elias thought the alien's eyes were lifeless, glassy jewels in the frost. But then a faint flicker, silver blue light sparking beneath the crust of ice. The pupil contracted, fighting against the storm's sting, and fixed on him. The prince was awake. Barely. The voice that came was shredded by cold, each syllable torn from a throat too raw for words. "You, human." The word dripped venom despite its weakness. It wasn't an observation. It was an accusation. A curse. Elias crouched closer, brushing frost from the alien's cracked lips. "Still breathing," he muttered half to himself. "Good enough." Aloud he said, "Easy now." "Don't waste your breath." The alien coughed, a harsh metallic sound reverberating inside his helm. His lips curled in defiance, revealing sharp teeth dulled by ice. "I would sooner freeze than take pity from your kind." Elias let out a low whistle that fogged the air between them. That's a bold thing to say for someone lying half dead in the snow. Kaelor tried to rise. Muscles quivered under plates of ornate armor, sigils of his house carved into the chest plate. But strength failed him. His arms collapsed, sending him slumping back, his head striking the ice with a dull thunk. Fury flared in his eyes, not at Elias, but at the humiliation of his own weakness. "You mock me," he hissed, voice strained. "A prince of Vaynar, reduced to begging for warmth from a fragile earthborn." Elias arched an eyebrow, settling back on his heels. "Begging? You're doing everything except beg. Believe me, I'd notice." The alien glared. Even broken and freezing, he held himself with the dignity of one who had been raised to rule. There was no fear in that gaze, only contempt. And under it a strange flicker Elias could not name. He let the silence stretch, broken only by the storm shrieking over the ruins. Then Elias spoke, his tone calm, deliberate. "Look, where I come from, we don't leave people to die in the cold. Doesn't matter if you're a friend, a stranger, or a pain in the ass who calls me fragile. Life is life. That's the rule." Kaelor's chest heaved, shallow and ragged. His eyes narrowed. "Compassion. Weakness dressed as virtue." Elias tilted his head. "Maybe. But right now, weakness is the only reason you're still alive." The prince coughed again, spattering flecks of dark blood against the snow. He turned his head away, jaw clenched tight. "Better death than shame." "Shame?" Elias barked out a short, humorless laugh. "You're freezing to death in the dirt, and you think shame's your biggest problem?" Kaelor didn't answer. His pride was a fortress, even as his body failed him. His breathing came shallow, every inhale a battle. Elias studied him in silence. He could feel the cold creeping into his own bones now, settling into muscle and marrow. The storm pressed harder, biting, testing. He knew what had to be done, and the knowledge sat heavy in his chest. He reached up and loosened the straps of his thermal coat. The movement was small, but Kaelor's eyes snapped back to him, wide with something close to panic. His cracked voice rasped out between chattering teeth. "Don't you dare!" Elias met his gaze, steady as bedrock. "You're not dying on my watch. Not today. You would give up your only warmth? For me?" The disbelief in Kaelor's tone was sharper than the wind. "Not for you," Elias said. "For life. That's the difference between us." The wind roared louder, carrying snow like daggers across their faces. Between them, in the frozen silence of a dead battlefield, the choice hung heavy. Elias's hands tightened on the coat's straps, and Kaelor's breath hitched, torn between fury and something he had no word for. Shock, maybe even fear. And for the first time, the proud alien prince looked less like a commander of armies and more like a young man, trembling in the snow, staring at a human who refused to let him die. The storm had teeth. It tore at Elias's exposed skin, gnawed at the seams of his gloves, and whispered the same message in his ear with every gust. "You don't have long." Kaelor Vaynar's breath came in ragged bursts, frost caking his lips. The faint glow of his alien eyes dimmed with every exhale. His gauntleted hand twitched uselessly in the snow, as though grasping for a weapon long buried beneath the drifts. Elias unclasped the final buckle of his thermal coat. The weight shifted on his shoulders, releasing the warmth that had clung to him like the last ember of a dying fire. The alien prince's head snapped toward him, his expression cutting through weakness with a sudden flash of fury. "You will not," Kaelor rasped, voice cracking, "demean me with your pity." Elias raised an eyebrow, lips pressed tight against the sting of the cold. Pity? He let out a short laugh that held no humor. You think this is about pity? Trust me, Prince, I'm not in the habit of stripping down in a blizzard to make a point. You mock me. Kalor spat, though his words slurred now. His chest heaved, shallow. A ruler accepts no charity. A warrior dies before surrendering to weakness. Elias crouched, their faces level, his breath fogging against Kalor's cracked helm. His voice lowered, steady but sharp. And yet here you are, freezing, alone, dying. Tell me, Prince, what glory is there in becoming another body lost to the snow? Will your pride keep your people warm when you're gone? Kalor's jaw clenched so hard a vein trembled at his temple. He said nothing, but his silence screamed louder than the storm. Elias sighed, his hands already sliding the coat off his shoulders. You're not getting it, are you? This isn't surrender. This isn't charity. It's survival. The thermal coat came free in a single motion, the cold striking Elias like a blade. The wind pierced through his thin undersuit immediately, stabbing at bone. His body shuddered. Still, he forced his arms to move, spreading the heavy fabric and draping it over the alien's shivering frame. Kalor froze, not from the weather, but from disbelief. The coat settled across his shoulders, the insulation activating against the prince's failing body heat. Color began faintly to return to his lips. The armor beneath his chest hissed as frost began to thaw. For several long heartbeats, Kalor simply stared at Elias, silver blue eyes wide in stunned silence. The expression was foreign, stripped of arrogance as though the concept itself was beyond comprehension. Why? The word escaped him as more of a whisper than a challenge. Why would you give what you cannot afford to lose? Elias sank back onto the snow, shivering, his own breath coming hard. He shrugged, though the motion was weak. Because you'll live, and that's enough. The alien's gaze flickered, scanning Elias as though searching for the hidden dagger, the unspoken bargain. Nothing came. Only a human, trembling violently, teeth clenched against the cold, offering no explanation beyond those simple words. You would trade your survival for mine? Kalor's voice cracked, disbelief sharper than the storm itself. This is madness. Maybe. Elias's lips tugged into a faint smile, even as frost gathered in his stubble. But madness keeps us alive. Kalor's chest rose and fell, his breath steadier now under the coat's protection. His mind whirled, trained from childhood in the unbreakable laws of Venar honor. Mercy was weakness, survival was earned, compassion was betrayal. And yet here sat a man defying those laws, dying for them, and gaining something Kalor's people had never understood. Strength. The silence stretched between them, heavy with more weight than all the banners of fallen dynasties. The storm howled, the ruins groaned, and for the first time in his life, Prince Kalor Venar found himself speechless before a human. The wind shrieked over the ruins, a voice of endless hunger, but Elias barely heard it now. Cold had teeth, and it sank them deep into his flesh the moment he let the coat go. Every gust gnawed further, carving through skin, muscle, and marrow until shivers rippled violently down his spine. He wrapped his arms around himself, but it was like hugging air. Already his body betrayed him. Fingers stiff, jaw clenching, breath burning in his lungs like shards of glass. The thermal coat lay heavy across Kalor's shoulders, sealing him in a cocoon of warmth. Steam hissed faintly as his armor thawed, frost melting down the grooves of his house's sigils. Beneath the helm, his chest rose more easily, breath returning with reluctant strength, but the prince did not move. He sat rigid, staring at Elias with wide, silver-blue eyes, as though the human before him were some impossible creature he had never known could exist. You, his voice cracked, broken not by cold now, but by something far sharper. You gave it. You truly gave it. Elias's teeth chattered so hard his next words were half swallowed. Told you. Not about pity, just about living. Kalor's gauntleted hands gripped the edges of the coat, trembling, not from cold, but from disbelief. On Eranos, mercy was treachery. Compassion was betrayal. Warmth was earned, never given. And yet here it was, laid over his body without demand, without bargain. His thoughts recoiled, searching for logic. What does the human gain? What plot lies hidden? But there was no trick, no deception in Elias's eyes. Only frost gathering at the edges of his lashes, only stubborn resolve hardening with every shiver. Kalor's throat tightened. He tried to shape words, but they came jagged, uncertain. "Why, risk your death? For me?" Elias managed the ghost of a smile, though his lips were pale and cracked. "Because you're still breathing." "That's enough." The prince looked at him as though he had spoken in an alien tongue. He had faced assassins and traitors, battled rival clans, sat at councils where a single glance carried more weight than armies. But never, not once, had he witnessed this. A man willing to bleed warmth into the storm for no reward but the survival of another. The storm pressed harder. Snow lashed across their faces. Elias hunched lower, every shiver sharper than the last, his body fighting a losing war. Kalor swallowed, feeling the weight of the coat as if it were iron shackles. The warmth seeping into him felt stolen, unnatural. He wanted to tear it off, throw it back at the human, roar his refusal into the storm. But his hands would not obey. Instead, they tightened around the coat, as though some deeper instinct had already betrayed his pride. He turned his face away, ashamed at his own hesitation. "You are insane," he muttered, the words rough and uneven. Elias chuckled weakly, the sound fraying at the edges. "Maybe, but insanity is what keeps us human." For a moment, Kalor was silent, listening to the storm's howl. His house had taught him that strength was endurance, that survival belonged only to the ruthless. But watching Elias tremble in the snow, choosing death for the sake of a man he should have called enemy, he felt something he had never known before, a fracture in certainty. The wind wailed. The ruins groaned, and between them a fragile, impossible truth took shape. Perhaps compassion was not weakness at all. Perhaps it was a different kind of strength, one Kalor had never been allowed to see. Kalor could feel the warmth flooding back into his veins. The numbness that had gripped his body retreated, and with each breath the coat restored, the storm seemed less cruel, less consuming. Yet instead of relief, shame settled heavy on his chest. The human shivered before him, lips blue, shoulders trembling with violent spasms. Every second Elias endured without protection was another second Kalor should have claimed the coat for himself. According to the laws of his people, survival was a crown one wore proudly, no matter the cost. The weak perished, the strong endured. That was the code. That was truth, but this human, this fragile creature had shattered that truth with a single act. Kalor closed his eyes, and memories surged unbidden. He remembered his father, the High Regent, standing tall in the Frost Temple, voice cold as the wind that tore across the Aranos Mountains. Mercy is treason. Compassion breaks the chain of strength. A prince does not give warmth. He takes it. He remembered the council chambers, the eyes of rivals glittering with hunger as they measured every flaw, every hesitation. Weakness was not forgiven. It was consumed. Yet here, in the ruins of a forgotten station, a human miner had done the unthinkable, given warmth without demand, without debt. And Kalor was alive because of it. His fists clenched around the coat's fabric, guilt curdling into a gnawing weight. To accept this gift was to betray his heritage. To reject it was to betray the life it had saved. "Elias," he rasped, voice thick with conflict. The human stirred weakly, eyes glassy but still alight with that strange, stubborn fire. "Still breathing," Elias whispered, forcing a grin that quivered like ice breaking on a river. The sight pierced Kalor more deeply than any blade. The human should have cursed him, demanded repayment, even begged for the coat's return. But instead, he clung to life with nothing more than sheer will, and still smiled. Kalor's jaw tightened. His people would call it madness, but a whisper in his mind, quiet, treacherous, asked if perhaps this madness was strength. The storm raged louder, flinging sheets of snow against the broken walls of the ruin. Kalor rose unsteadily to his feet, the coat rustling as he moved. His breath fogged in the air, warmer now, stronger. He looked down at Elias, slumped against the icy stone. The human's body convulsed with shivers, his skin pale as carved marble. He would not last long like this. Kalor's pride screamed at him. Let him fall! One life for another. This is the law. But another voice, faint, unfamiliar yet undeniable, spoke louder. He saved you. Now you must save him. The dilemma tore at him, a battle no blade could resolve. For the first time in his life, Kalor felt powerless. Not before an enemy, but before a choice. Finally he knelt, his armored hand trembling as it brushed frost from Elias's cheek. The contact startled him, so fragile, so breakable this human flesh was. And yet beneath the weakness, there was resilience his people had never recognized. You should not exist, Kalor murmured, voice raw. And yet, here you are, changing me. Elias's eyes fluttered half shut, his voice a sliver of sound. That's what humans do, Kalor's breath caught. For the first time in his life, he bowed his head, not to his father, not to his house, but to a single human shivering in the snow. The storm howled above them, uncaring, but something deeper than survival had been born in the ruins that night. Something Kalor would never be able to return from. A choice, a fracture, a beginning. The storm screamed like a living thing, clawing at the ruins with icy talons, hurling shards of snow through every shattered wall and broken beam. The night was endless and merciless, the kind of cold that gnawed the soul until only instinct remained. Kalor stood in the heart of it, the human's coat heavy on his shoulders, warmth pulsing through him like stolen fire. Every beat of his heart carried the weight of betrayal, not to Elias, but to everything he had been taught to be. The laws of Eranos thundered in his mind. The strong endure. The weak perish. Mercy is a chain, compassion a blade at your own throat. And yet, Elias had broken every one of those laws, and somehow Kalor was still alive. He looked down at the human. Elias lay slumped against the jagged stone, shivering violently, breath shallow, skin pale. The coat that should have saved him was wrapped around Kalor instead. Guilt twisted like a knife in Kalor's chest. It was not the guilt of weakness as his father had warned against, but something sharper, stranger, an obligation. A bond. The storm pressed harder. As if testing him, Kalor dropped to one knee, the armor groaning, and reached for Elias. His gauntlet hovered for a moment, uncertain, then moved with newfound resolve. He pulled the human against him, wrapping the coat wider, enfolding Elias into his own heat. The contact seared him, not with cold, but with something deeper. He had never held another being like this, never shared warmth without demand. On Eranos, such intimacy was weakness, the sort of act whispered in disgrace. Yet now, holding Elias close, Kalor felt no shame. He felt strength. Elias stirred faintly, eyes flickering open, glassy and unfocused. His lips trembled with the ghost of a smile. Didn't think. Aliens did hugs. Kalor's throat tightened. We do not. Not for anyone. Not for enemies. He swallowed, the words scraping out like stones. But you are no longer my enemy. The declaration startled even him. It hung in the air, sharp as a blade drawn in defiance of centuries of law. Elias let out a weak laugh, the sound fragile, but alive. Guess we're even then. Kalor shook his head, clutching him tighter against the storm. No, not even. A prince repays his debts. You will not die here, not while I draw breath. The storm howled louder, as though challenging him. Snow lashed against his armor, winds clawed at the coat. But Kalor only straightened, holding Elias as though daring the storm to try harder. And in that moment, Kalor made a silent vow, not to his house, not to his ancestors, but to the fragile human in his arms. A vow forged not of duty but of choice. If compassion is weakness, then let me be weak. If mercy is treason, then I will betray. For this human, I will defy the law itself. Lightning flared beyond the clouds, illuminating the ruin for a heartbeat. In its stark light, Kalor looked not like a prince of Eranos, but something more, a warrior reborn, a man who had chosen a path no one of his kind had dared tread. The storm could take its fury elsewhere. Together they would endure, and so, beneath the shrieking heavens, a pact was sealed, not of words, but of warmth shared in the cold, a pact between alien and human, a pact strong enough to defy an empire. Dawn bled into the storm like a reluctant wound, pale light spilling across the shattered ruins. The blizzard's fury had lessened, its voice dropping from a scream to a whisper. Snow still drifted in slow, heavy curtains, blanketing the wreckage in silence. Elias stirred weakly in Kaelor's arms, warmth shared between them in defiance of the night. His pulse fluttered faintly against Kaelor's gauntlet, fragile, human, but steady. Alive, Kaelor had not slept. He had not dared. Instead, he had listened to every gust of wind, every shift of broken stone, waiting. Storms were honest. They struck without malice. His people, however, were not so merciful, and he had been right to be wary. The first sound came low and distant, the rumble of engines. Then came the second, the high-pitched whine of repulsor drives cutting through the thinning air. Kaelor stiffened, every nerve alight. Shadows moved in the snow, figures materializing like ghosts from the storm. Sleek armor glinted through the haze, marked with the sigil of his house, the silver talon wrapped in flame, his kin. His hunters. Elias's eyes blinked open, bleary and confused. That doesn't sound friendly. Kaelor's jaw tightened. It is not. A squad of 6 advanced in formation, their visors glowing, weapons cradled with the easy grace of professionals. At their center strode a figure Kaelor knew too well. Tall, broad, his armor etched with the crimson markings of command. Lord Vaedran, captain of the royal guard and his father's most loyal hound. The sight sent Kaelor's stomach into a cold knot. "Prince Kaelor!" Vaedran called, his voice carrying easily over the snow. "The regent believed you dead. Imagine our relief to find you, surviving." His gaze flicked to Elias, then narrowed. "Though your company is curious." Kaelor rose slowly, keeping Elias close, shielded against his side. Every instinct screamed at him to hide the human, to deny the truth. But he could feel Elias trembling, could hear the rasp of his breath, and the vow from the night before rang in his mind. "You will not die here, not while I draw breath." "I endured," Kaelor said flatly, his voice carrying the authority of his bloodline. "That is all your regent requires to know." Vaedran's lip curled. "You endure wrapped in rags, holding a human as though he were treasure? Tell me, my prince, have you forgotten who you are?" The words struck deep, sharper than frostbite. For a heartbeat, Kaelor wavered, torn between reflexive obedience and the memory of Elias pressing the coat into his hands. Whispering, "You need it more." His grip on Elias tightened. "No," Kaelor said, voice low but unyielding. "I have not forgotten. It is because I remember who I am that he lives." The guard shifted uneasily. Vaedran's eyes narrowed to slits. "Mercy, my prince, is poison. If the regent hears of this weakness, he will demand you prove your loyalty, perhaps with the human's blood." Elias gave a weak cough, trying for humor despite the danger. "Tell him. I'm not very tasty." Kaelor's chest ached at the sound. Fragile though he was, Elias still defied despair with humor. That, more than any law, was strength. Kaelor stepped forward, planting his feet firmly in the snow. His shadow fell long across the ruin, his silver-blue eyes blazing with resolve. "Then let the regent hear," Kaelor declared. "If compassion is weakness, let me be weak. If mercy is poison, then I will drink it. But this human does not die." Silence struck the squad like a blade through ice. The storm itself seemed to hold its breath. Vaedran stared, shock flickering behind the iron mask of his expression. To defy the regent was unthinkable. To defy him for a human was treason beyond words, and yet, here Kaelor stood, unbent, unbroken, his vow etched in every word. For the first time, Elias looked at him not as an alien, not as a prince, but as something more, an ally, a protector, perhaps even a friend. Vaedran raised his hand, and the squad leveled their rifles. Then, my prince, he said coldly, you have chosen rebellion. Kalor squared his shoulders, pulling Elias closer. No, he answered. I have chosen freedom. The storm was not over. It had only just begun.